love Nigeria.
Some
people are not saying it. It's okay, I understand.
I
have discovered that it's the society that reproduces the leaders.
When
we shout about the leaders, we are the one that produce them. We are the one that put people that we want there. And they represent who we are. Okay, let's say this way. How many of you have a candidate in your mind you wish we win? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Now, those of you that are going to vote, I want to pray a prayer for you. And I want your loud amen. That man you want to vote for, may your children have his character in Jesus' name. That man you want to vote for, that man you are rooting for, that man you are shouting on Facebook and crying about, may your children have his destiny in Jesus' name. May they act like him, behave like him. You are not saying amen. Go and think. If you don't want a leader that your children will look like, why do you want to vote for him? If you know you don't want a leader that will be the picture of your own children, why do you want to go and cast your vote for such a person? I want to pray again. Whoever you vote for, let destiny, good or bad, come upon your children.
Election officials in Nigeria on Saturday staged mock biometric accreditation for voters ahead of this month's presidential and parliamentary elections. The country goes to the polls on the 25th of February to elect a successor to President Muhammadu Buhari.
This is just to test that the BVIWE is working, for people to know that, and that the job of BVIWE is just to accredit people, either facially or through their thumbprinting. If you can't thumbprint well, then we bring out the facial to enable us know that you are the original owner of that card you are bringing. Now that card also was issued by INEC.
President Buhari steps down after 2 terms, the maximum permitted under the constitution. Officials are keen for the election to run smoothly.
When I heard, the people, ringing the bell that each and every individual, the eligible voters, that they should come out, and do the mock accreditation. I had to go and pick my card, and when I came out, I did not spend a single minute, before I was accredited. And that is a very good, score mark, on the part of INEC.
Some voters were excited about the exercise and had their biometrics taken by INEC officials to help improve preparations for the general elections.
As the rest of the world marks 2023 World Cancer Day celebration, here in Abuja, Nigeria, a group held an annual 5-kilometer walk awareness. Since 2015, Pink Blue has been hosting this project, an initiative led by the Union for International Cancer Control. With this year's theme closing the care gap, the group appeals for more medical personnel in the health sector, adding that Nigeria bears a whole burden of cancer.
We are really committed to this theme of the year, closing the care gap. And we are asking all stakeholders in health, the Federal Ministry of Health, the NMA, all people concerned in health to do a lot more for the cancer patient.
Every year alone, we have 1.1 million cases across Africa. Increasingly, we have over 700,000 deaths in Africa. And so we felt that it was important to partner with Project Pink Blue to support the cause, to ensure that there's awareness raising.
Some cancer survivors at the event encourage other patients to be hopeful and abide by medical prescriptions, adding that the disease can be managed successfully.
I've survived cancer for the past 5 years, and I feel that I need to show the world that we can conquer cancer no matter what it is.
When I was diagnosed, I was so afraid. I couldn't even mingle with people. I was so isolated. But when I saw people that have survived, the groups, people that work against cancer, I was relieved a bit.
Nigeria is one of the countries in the world with the highest cancer mortality rates, with approximately 4 out of 5 cases resulting to death.
The
United States has shot down the suspected Chinese spy balloon that's been travelling across the US over the last few days. Authorities temporarily closed the airspace over the Carolina coastline as the balloon approached the Atlantic Ocean, where a fighter jet finally brought its journey to an end. Beijing claims the balloon was a civilian research airship that strayed into US airspace. Well, here is US President Joe Biden speaking to reporters about the downing of the suspected Chinese spy balloon.
On Wednesday, when I was briefed on the balloon, I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. They decided, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, they decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water outside within the 12-mile limit. They successfully took it down, and I want to compliment our aviators who did it, and we'll have more to report on this a little later.
You have overstayed your welcome. We can do it on our own. Those were the words of Burkina Faso's junta government to the French troops stationed at the borders. The West African countries severed ties with France and ordered their troops to leave within a month. Anti-French sentiment has grown in Burkina Faso, a former French colony, since Ibrahim Traoré seized power in September last year. Traoré has been more overtly open to working with other countries, notably Russia. Here's a report from Ouagadougou.
These protests are not new to Burkina Faso. They have been recurring for months. The call has been the same. Several hundred people demonstrated in Ouagadougou against the French presence and demanded the departure of its French ambassador to Burkina Faso.
We don't want their help anymore. We want them to go back. We're tired of them. The French ambassador, we want him to go back. The soldiers in Camboinsin, we all want them to go back. Let them free Burkina.
We have decided we want to lead this fight. The war we are currently waging, Burkina Faso has decided to lead the fight with good partners. And we feel that France is not the ideal partner to accompany us to the final victory.
And now Burkina Faso's junta government ordered hundreds of French troops to depart the West African country within a month, adding the decision had been made to end the presence of France's military on Burkinabe soil.
What we denounce today is the agreement that allows, of course, the French forces to be present in Burkina Faso. This is not about the end of diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and France. The vision of the transition today, it is the Burkinabe themselves who will make the sacrifice for the liberation of our territory, for the reconquest of the integrity of the territory, and especially for the refoundation.
Days before the expulsion order, a French minister said her government would not stop supporting Burkina Faso in its fight against Islamist militants and wished to remain involved despite the growing anti-French sentiment and diplomatic tensions.
We know the price that the Burkinabe armed forces and the civilian population have been paying for years in the face of groups that have decided to turn the country from haven to a war zone.
Relations between France and Burkina Faso, a former French colony, have deteriorated following two military coups that were partly spurred by the authorities' failure to protect civilians from jihadist attacks. France has some 400 special forces based in Burkina Faso to help government forces battle a violent Islamist insurgency that has spread across the Central Sahel region from Mali over the past decade.
It is no secret. Resentment towards France in large parts of Africa is growing to levels not seen in decades. That anger mostly stems from the military footprint that France maintains in several of its former colonies and the close relationship the French government has held with many unpopular leaders in that region. But France's President Emmanuel Macron is blaming this rising anti-French sentiment on other countries, including Turkey. During a recent trip to France's former colony of Algeria, Macron said that a campaign by Russia, China, and Turkey was spreading anti-French feelings on the continent. He also accused the three countries of having a neo-colonial and imperialist agenda. Turkey's foreign ministry, meanwhile, blasted Macron's remarks, saying the French leader needs to confront his own country's colonial past and to stop accusing others. France, which maintains military bases in several of its former African colonies, has seen growing resentment against its policies in the region. In Chad, anti-French protests broke out back in May following similar outbursts in Mali, Niger, as well as Burkina Faso over the past year.
You'd be familiar with these two leaders. One, a nationalist prime minister, whose coalition came to power with a thumping majority, and her no-nonsense approach making the European Union uncomfortable. And the other, leading the largest nation in the European Union, promising a new era. Macron finds himself cornered thanks to a mountain of challenges staring at him. The Macron versus Meloni exchange has now taken a turn that's just more than indirect jibes. But why are the two even fighting in the first place? Before we get into the details, let's look at Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's latest remarks.
Questo si chiama franco CFA. È la moneta coloniale che la Francia stampa per 14 nazioni africane, alle quali applica il signoraggio e in forza delle quali sfrutta le risorse di questa nazione.
Giorgia Meloni says that France exploits the resources of African nations. That is some serious talk by Meloni, whose disdain for France and Emmanuel Macron is growing by the day. With her latest remark, Meloni has hit out at France for the exploitation of African nations, that too on live television. And she doesn't stop there. Her concluding statement will make the theme of this tussle very clear.
Non è prendere gli africani e spostarli in Europa. La soluzione è liberare l'Africa da certi europei che la sfruttano e consentire a queste persone di vivere di quello che hanno.
Meloni has made it clear that African nations have to be freed from the clutches of European nations like France, who continue to exploit them for their own benefit. Meloni's statement comes at a time when France and Italy are engaged in a tussle over migrants for the last few weeks. And it all began with Ocean Viking last month, a rescue ship carrying 237 migrants, including 57 children.
A former Russian army officer has told the BBC he witnessed Russian soldiers committing war crimes in Ukraine. In an exclusive interview, Konstantin Yevremov has said that Ukrainian prisoners of war were humiliated, beaten and shot. Mr. Yevremov left the Russian army in August last year and has fled abroad. He's been talking to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg.
But Konstantin Yevremov was there, and the reality, he says, is very different. Konstantin was a senior lieutenant in the Russian army, but he's fled Russia. And he's agreed to tell me about crimes he says he saw Russian soldiers committing in Ukraine. Starting here, this is one of Konstantin's first photos from Ukraine, an airbase seized by Russian troops in Melitopol.
I saw looting there. Soldiers and officers grabbed everything they could. They climbed all over the planes and went through all the buildings. One soldier took away a lawnmower. He said proudly, "I'll take this home and cut the grass next to our barracks." Buckets, axes, bicycles, they bunged it all in trucks.
Konstantin says that on the day Russia invaded Ukraine, he tried to quit the army. He was warned he'd face up to 10 years in prison for desertion. In occupied Ukraine, he was sent to guard this artillery unit, and then a facility where he says he witnessed Ukrainian prisoners of war being tortured.
The Ukrainian had a blindfold on. The colonel put a pistol to the prisoner's forehead and said, "I'm going to count to 3 and then shoot you in the head." He counted and then fired just to the side of his head, on both sides. The colonel started shouting at him. I said, "Comrade Colonel, he can't hear you. You've deafened him." The interrogations, this torture, continued for about a week, every day, at night, sometimes twice a day.
The interrogations became increasingly violent, claims Konstantin.
During another interrogation, the colonel shot the prisoner in the arm and in the right leg, under the knee, and hit the bone. I went to the commanders and said the Ukrainian needs to go to hospital. He'll be dead by morning from blood loss. We dressed him up in a Russian uniform and took him to hospital. We told him, don't say you're a Ukrainian prisoner of war, because either the doctors will refuse to treat you, or the injured Russian soldiers will hear you and shoot you.
The BBC has verified documents, photographs and videos provided by Konstantin confirming his identity and his movements. Once he'd returned to Russia, back on base, he was accused of a serious breach of discipline for refusing to go back to Ukraine. He was dismissed from the army. A Russian human rights group, Gulag.net, has helped him leave the country.
I apologize to the whole Ukrainian nation for coming to their home as an uninvited guest with a weapon in my hands. I don't even have a moral right to ask for forgiveness from the Ukrainians. I can't forgive myself, so I can't expect them to forgive me.
Konstantin says that senior officers called him a traitor for being anti-war, but he points out that he gave an oath to protect his country, not to attack another.
Russia tonight breaking the nuclear arms control treaty with the United States. For the first time since the signing of the transformational New START treaty, Russia is refusing to allow the U.S. to inspect its nuclear weapons. Now, this move comes at a moment where the world faces the highest risk of nuclear conflict since the Cold War. And it is happening as Putin and his military leaders have threatened nuclear war.
With regard to the threat of a nuclear war, Svetlana Gennadievna, you are right. The threat is growing, so why hide the truth? We don't have the resources to defeat the NATO bloc with conventional means, but we have nuclear weapons for that.
There's more where that came from. I mean, even 2 weeks ago, Putin's top ally and Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev, warned, quote, the loss of a nuclear power in a conventional war can provoke the outbreak of a nuclear war. Putin's breaking the most significant arms treaty in modern history comes as his back is up against the wall. I want you to just listen to this from Russian state media. This is a well-known and highly respected Russian analyst.
By the start of the mobilization, our airborne forces lost 40 to 50% of the staff.
40 to 50%, just coming out and saying that, gone, dead. And Western officials today warn that Putin does not have the manpower to replace all of them or the more than 100,000 Russians who are estimated to have already died on the battlefield. And Putin's reliance on the Wagner Group to fight is also now running, it appears, up against its own manpower issues. They're now apparently looking for prisoners from Ukrainian prisons. So these are Ukrainians who have been spending months in prison in a war zone, now being recruited to come out and kill Ukrainians for Wagner Group. The mayor of Melitopol today saying that Wagner fighters are being sent to Melitopol to look for future Wagnerites among their prisoners. Now, the Wagner Group is trying to turn this weakness into a way to mock the United States, saying that it welcomes American fighters, too. The group has a press unit, and in a statement to CNN, they wrote this: we would like to inform you that if American citizens wish to join the Wagner Group, they can then send their appeal to the Wagner Press Service. We will definitely look into it. All right, in a moment, you're going to hear more from the front lines about the state of Putin's Wagner Group, which is so crucial to all of this, including why the Ukrainians say Wagner's fighters often seem like they're on drugs.
2 weeks after the dead body of Cameroonian journalist Salomon Bani Zogo, better known as Martinez Zogo, was found, an influential tycoon has been questioned. Jean-Pierre Amougou Bellinga was arrested Monday, according to the Cameroonian Communications Ministry. Bellinga's media group L'Anecdote confirmed his arrest early in the morning, adding he was at the headquarters of the gendarmerie's top institution. Martinez Zogo's mutilated body was found Sunday, January 22, near Soa, a suburb of Yaoundé. His murder left many shocked in Cameroon. The 51-year-old was the host of popular daily radio show Embouteillage, or Gridlock in English. On the air, he regularly tackled cases of corruption and alleged embezzlement, not hesitating to call out important personalities by name. Fellow journalists paid their respects to Zogo, urging for an investigation. Cameroonian President Paul Biya ordered Thursday, February 2, a probe into the abduction and subsequent brutal killing of the journalist. That same day, the presidency announced several people had been arrested.
Standing near the dried riverbed that marks Ghana's northern border, Alima can see her hamlet lying in Burkina Faso less than 2 kilometers away. Even though her home is just a short walk away, she says she will never go back there to live. One night last year, jihadist gunmen arrived in the settlement and killed 2 watchmen. Alima and her sons hid with other women and children, while the men fled briefly across the river into Ghana.
Yes, it's a real threat because people see people fleeing from Burkina Faso into Ghana. And of course, the reasons are being told why they are fleeing. And therefore, people are mindful that is it also going to happen in Ghana? And that is really what it is on people's minds.
Ghana, along with neighbors Benin, Togo and Ivory Coast, was fast becoming the new front line in the Sahel jihadist war. So far, Ghana has escaped a direct attack, but it is already tackling the economic and social fallout.
We are also getting the army, the police, immigration and all that involved because, you know, our border is very porous. And what we are doing is trying to, put these people in these places so that if there's any crossing at all in the night or anything like that, then the army will deal with them.
The Sahel insurgency spread from Mali in 2012 to neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso in 2015. 2 million people have been displaced and thousands killed in Burkina Faso alone. Civil society organizations Stand Up SA gathered droves of supporters to march to power utility Eskom headquarters in Johannesburg, South Africa, Thursday to demand an end to load shedding and a pending electricity tariff hike. The group handed over a memorandum of demands that echoed those of many South Africans facing an energy crisis. Many experts believe the South African government's failure to invest in new power plants is at the root of the problem that has seen the frequency and duration of the rolling power cuts now at unprecedented levels. South Africa generates approximately 85% of its energy from coal. The national power utility, Eskom, has the capacity to generate up to 45,000 megawatts. But it has been unable to supply even 27,000 megawatts, giving rise to power cuts or load shedding that can last several hours a day.
South Africa's funeral parlour industry is feeling the pinch as small-scale and big-scale mortuaries are experiencing the rise of maintaining cold room temperatures due to ongoing electricity blackouts. The South African Chamber of Undertakers says parlours are spending around $40 per day to power generators, and the organisation believes government needs to offer subsidies to cover the cost of diesel.
The load shedding has been catastrophic to the funeral industry. It has become very expensive to store human remains because we have to pay electricity and also buy diesel or petrol for the generator to power off the cold room.
Behind me is a cold storage which houses 8 human remains. At this Johannesburg parlour, owner of Ndoda Funeral Services says he's spending more money on embalming in order to keep bodies from decomposing sooner than they should.
When the fridges are not operating, when the fridges are not working, we are now also faced with cost of embalming bodies, which preserves bodies in an environment where the fridge is not operating. So it brings more cost. So this load shedding, it really is making life very difficult for us. So now,
police stood guard as residents of Soshanguve Township, north of the capital Pretoria, took to the streets Friday to protest against power cuts and water shortages. The demonstrators burned tires and filled roads with debris, paralyzing traffic.
Our taps has run dry. We are not bathing. We are not like the schools. Every time the schools are going home early. Now there is a lack of education because of this water. There is no water in the schools or in the clinic we are being sent back when we are going to clinic. If you've got something, there is no water. So this is a serious problem. Hence, we are doing this. It's not a child's play. No, water is life, and we've got the right to have water.
South Africa has been crippled by record power cuts since last year, plunging the country into darkness. As a result, many pump stations and water treatment centers have stopped working.
Our fridges go down. We've got insulin. We've got quite a few products that are kept in fridges. See, it has to be cooled. It has to be kept in a cool place. And with load shedding carrying on in this manner, we're losing a lot of stock as well. If it continues in this way, I don't see us surviving within the next 2 years.
The country's Water and Sanitation Ministry said it was working with water utilities to improve the situation. The problems have especially hit Johannesburg's Gauteng province, but not exclusively.
On a race against the clock in order to save lives, the challenge for South African paramedics is getting harder as worsening power blackouts in the nation further strain the country's health sector.
We got called to a hospital where the generator stopped working, and then it was 18 paramedics and 9 ICU vents until the generators were fixed.
Jeanette Malanga is one of the vulnerable persons hurt by government-enforced load shedding. The Soweto resident has been forced to go without the oxygen concentrator helping her breathe. Meanwhile, her backup tank is empty. The 8 to 10 hours with no power have made it too expensive to refill. Her daughter is worried.
When I look at my mom, she's quiet and expecting this. I can't say anything, but myself, I'm scared.
From southern Ethiopia to northern Kenya and Somalia, 22 million people are at risk of hunger, victims of a historic drought that spanned 2 years and expected to last for the next few months. This is according to a new UN report. This figure, according to the report, has almost doubled since the beginning of 2022, when 13 million people were facing hunger in the Horn of Africa.
Due to the drought, my child did not receive appropriate medical service. We were too busy coping with the drought, saving the livestock, and thinking of the family's survival. All these issues aggravated the condition of my child.
For Somalia, which is the most severely affected country with more than half of its population facing drought, nearly 5.6 million people are now acutely food insecure.
When the mother is malnutrition, she may have a child with malnutrition again. While she's in pregnancy, she may be in malnutrition. She might birth a child with malnutrition. So since her breasts do not have enough milk.
The current drought is caused by a sequence of 5 failed rainy seasons since late 2020, the first time this has happened in at least 40 years. Ghanaian international footballer Christian Atsu has reportedly been trapped under rubble after a 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit Turkey and Syria on Monday. The 31-year-old, who previously had spells with Newcastle United, Everton and Porto, has been playing for Ataspor in the Turkish Super League since joining the club last September. Atsu was the hero for the Star of the South on Sunday, coming off the substitute bench to score a 97th-minute goal in a 1-0 win over Kasimpasa. Newcastle United tweeted they were praying for some positive news. Ataspor's club's sporting director, Taner Savut, is also thought to be trapped.
Algeria coach Madji Bougera has said he feels disappointed after losing 5-4 on penalties to Senegal in the final of the African Nations Championship. The efforts of the Desert Foxes were acknowledged by the winning team. The young team have suffered in a match like this, he says. We played against a good team in Algeria which didn't concede any goals and scored a lot of goals in the tournament. I think these players showed their character. That's why we won this trophy. Congratulations to these kids. Bougera said it was a major upset, not just for himself, but for all the team and supporters. It's a disappointment for the public and for the players, he says. And we had the best attack with 9 goals. This really hurts, especially since we missed the last penalty kick. It's the furthest Algeria have ever come in the Chance tournament.